Do you have something special to offer? Sure you do, and so do our guests. And they'll share their special something in just a moment.
You've got something to offer, something that's new, something to offer, and that something is you. You've got something to offer, something that's new, something to offer, and that something is you. You've got a vision, you persevere.
Welcome to Something to Offer, the show that spotlights people living their dreams and making a difference. And now the host of our show, Anne Marie Offer.
To offer, and that something is you.
Today's guests are Dr. Charles Wright, founder, Kimberly Camp, president. I'm going to do all their names first and then what they are. And Margaret Ward, archivist and librarian of the Museum of African American History here in Detroit. And it's the largest museum of this kind in the world. And I'm so thrilled to have you all here and that you had this dream. It's incredible. So right away I want to ask a question that's going to seem not related at all. But I want to know if any of you, and all of you, have a special heirloom that was handed down to you from your family that you have now, or that means a lot to you, or that you remember having gotten, and who gave it to you, and why it means something to you?
Well, I have some photographs from earlier generations of my family, and we've kept them in the family because they had special significance for us. And I think we still have them, yeah.
That's great.
That's what we had. In Alabama, in southern Alabama, you didn't get much more than photographs, and you hung on to those, so that's where I came from.
Okay, great, thank you. How about you, Kimberly?
What I have is the trunk that my great-grandparents sent my grandmother north in when she married my grandfather.
Oh, wow.
And we actually found it. They had kept it in the basement for years, and while they were still alive, thank goodness, I was in the basement one day and said, you know, what is this? And that's when my grandmother told me the story.
Oh,
and
nice.
they're both gone now, but I still have that piece.
That's wonderful. How about you, Margaret?
Well, I have a few things that I'm really proud and happy to have, and I'm going to be passing them on to my children. One of the things that I have, my grandmother was a seamstress in Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama to be exact, and she made many wedding dresses and pieces of clothing for folks, but I have a basque that she made that is blue velvet and black velvet stripes, and her waist must have been that big, but I have that. And then from my father having been in the newspaper business, I have what they call, it's a pig. What it is metal that's melted down for linotype. This is right a long time ago when they did printing off of melted leather, lead. And I have that piece.
Oh, wow.
It's a treasure.
That's great. That's wonderful. We're going to take a minute for an offering, and when we come back, we're going to find out how Dr. Wright made his dream become a reality. So you won't want to miss that. We'll see you in a minute. We're back, and I'm going to speak with Dr. Wright for a few minutes, ladies, and we're going to go around. And first I'm going to find out a little bit. Dr. Wright, what made you choose medicine as a profession, and how did you pick your specialty?
Well, I didn't really pick the specialty at first. Had not given thought to medicine at first at all. But my mother gave me my first birthday party when I was 8 years old. And my classmates and schoolmates were gathered around. And one kid's mother came upstairs, or came up to the house, and we didn't have stairs either. But she said, "Charles, what are you going to be when you get to be a man?" My mother did not vacillate 5 seconds. She said, "Charles is going to be a doctor." And for me, that settled the issue for the rest of my life. But she didn't know what she had assigned me to, because there were no black doctors in Alabama where I was, and she had no idea about the segregation in medical schools and all that. But she said that I was going to be a doctor, and so it worked out that way. It wasn't easy.
I can't imagine that it was. It must have been very difficult to get through school, establish a practice. I'm sure a lot of people were threatened by your work.
All of that.
Yep.
But When Laura Wright spoke, I always said the Lord was running around behind her with his notebook, so he would not have to and able to know what he should do at any particular day.
That was it. The word was out, and that was it. Okay. I wanted to ask you, in my reading, you took a trip to Denmark?
Yes.
And is that what inspired you to
That was
develop?
sort of final. It was the Denmark thing came not to stimulate me to become a physician.
I mean for the museum.
Oh,
is that what stimulated that, or what?
Well, that was sort of late too, because my first job professionally was to deliver babies.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to deliver babies who were healthy, who would fend for themselves and could make a mark for themselves. And so I made sure that my babies breathed and cried spontaneously, so that those brain cells could function continuously after the cord was cut. But after a few years, I noticed what society had done to those kids that were born healthy but became scarred after being born. And I decided it was time to do something about society. So the museum is the effort to bring that into control. It was to have those kids either force the public to accept them as human beings, or act as if they are, and they are human beings, unquestionably. So the museum was one method that I could use to force the issue to the point that I think it has. So the people who have followed in following the course of the museum have seen to it that that is happening. Still does.
That's great, and we're going to get into more of how you actually made all that happen in a few minutes. Now, I'd like to jump around a little bit, if I may. Margaret, did you have a fascination with books, or, as we were talking about, heirlooms, or maybe keeping family lineage together? What made you choose to go into archivery? Is that the right way to say that?
Archives,
and library sciences.
Well, I always liked books. And I grew up in a family that was centered around writing. My father and mother both worked in the newspaper. So it was just a natural gravitation for me. At that time that I was growing up, you either had to be a school teacher or a nurse, neither of which was particularly appealing to me. But I had a friend who was a librarian, and I thought, I could do that. And that's the way I got into library science.
Great. And I'm going to ask Kimberly, you're an artist. You're a visual artist, a painter, a sculptor too. And
That's right.
what brought that to you? When did that inspiration come for?
Actually, I come from a family of artists. All of my uncles, my aunt, my mother, my father are all in the arts, mostly visual arts, but also performing. My dad plays jazz trumpet, and my mother plays piano, and it's something that we just did as growing up, was be involved in the arts. And I think the getting involved in arts administration, museum management, and those kinds of things is a natural evolution for a lot of artists. It really should, because it's the only way that we can ensure the quality of the kinds of institutions that we know that provide the cultural support for people to learn about the arts and culture. So.
Great, good. You answered two questions in one, so I don't have to ask another. Dr. Wright, I wanted to ask, when and what was the process like when you started? You started off in the two homes, which unfortunately we couldn't get a picture of yesterday. Somehow we kept missing the houses. But what was that process like to start the museums there? And what kind of support did you need to help expand it? And then we'll talk about the expansion and show some of the museum as it is.
When we started out in what had been my medical office, I moved to another site, and the building was vacant. At least the basement was vacant. And we started out in the basement of a building at West Grand Boulevard and West Warren in Detroit. And we grew by selling memberships and having raffles and all kinds of things to attract money. And it expanded and grew. And people began to be more interested. And one thing led to the other. Now, you mentioned my trip to Denmark. Well, just before we started the museum, I had heard about the Denmark Museum that grew out of their reaction to the German who occupied their country. When the Germans were defeated and left, the Danes went around the country and gathered up all the memorabilia of their presence. and they had the very best record of anybody in Europe for protecting their Jews. And when I was there, the friend who I was visiting, his mother took me around to show me this Denmark museum. And she told me how they raised money and how they involved the people. And I said to my friend who was traveling with me at that time, I said, this is what we need in Detroit. And so he and I communicated, the Danish fellow who sent me, and he sent some very interesting letters as to how they did it. And this was a model that was translated into Detroit and helped us a great deal. And I still express appreciation to him when I see him or write to him.
Oh, that's great.
How we got started.
Wonderful. We're going to take a moment for another offering, and when we come back, we're going to really take a short tour, visual tour through the museum and get many more details on this beautiful, wonderful place that I adore. And that's my new thing of adoration. So we'll see you in a minute. We're back with Dr. Wright, Kimberly, and Margaret, and I want to thank you again for being here. And we talked about the original, and any of you can, if you get tired and Kimberly wants to talk or Margaret wants to talk, it's fine. The second building, which I believe, Margaret, you would have come on board during the second building time, was you were in from 1987 till about this February of 97, so that was 10 years. And I know Mayor Young was very helpful in making that dream a reality. How did Margaret come to you, and how is it to make the dream keep getting bigger and bigger? What does that feel like to see it expand?
Well, Margaret and I have been friends for a long time. She was at one time a patient of mine, and it was very easy to get to her. And I said, Margaret, I hear you're retiring from your job at the
Detroit Public Library, Burton Historical Collection.
I said it would be kind of natural if you would come and help us form a library. And my first wife had asked me to establish a library because she realized she wouldn't be alive when the museum actually was open. And so I spoke to Margaret. Margaret said, sure, fine, and she came and has been a wonderful asset, and still is, to putting the pieces together and bridge the gap between the beginning and where we are now.
How is that? It must be a very, it's a tremendous responsibility to chronicle everything. And
Well, it is in one way, but if you live it and enjoy it, it's not anything that's onerous for you. You just do it because you love it. And I marched with the group when we marched from the old building into our new building, and I had thought, well, this will be a piece of cake. I'll stay a couple of years, we'll get this thing together, and then I'll move on and write my memoirs. As you know, we haven't stayed, like they say, too long at the fair, and so I've been there from 87 to 97, and it has grown. And I think I helped Dr. Wright and Kimberly both to see that it was right to move. Many people wondered why we had such a wonderful edifice, why we would even think about going further, but we saw the need. We saw the public response to what we were doing, and we just didn't have enough space to do it. And so this was really my thrust as far as Kimberly was concerned when she came, that yes, I will help you and I will stay. What we have now is a record of the 28 years now. How many years is it now that this museum has been in?
32?
32?
32 years.
32 years, okay.
Started in 65.
65, I've got all the records there, organized so that we can pull in a year and tell what happened in those years.
And that's a very valuable thing to have.
it is. It really is. Because I know even in my family when my sister's trying to put pieces together, you know, from before and get pictures, and my aunt goes to Ireland or this and that. It's a lot of work to know your lineage and know your roots and know the contributions of all of the world, you know. And this, to me, the African American contribution and the contribution of Africa has been so neglected for so long, or so like, okay, let's just like leave it over here. We don't want to talk. But people don't even realize that, you know, things like street lights and many, many things that we use every day, they don't know who made it. They don't see it in the history books. But this is an opportunity to really waken people's awareness and acknowledge the accomplishments and contributions to society of one group of people. But in effect, pointing that out, it then makes us aware that we need to look at the contributions of everyone, because we really are all connected, and you can't sever. I mean, you know, your fingers are all together. If one leaves, then you have to adjust, but still you have something from, you know, your hand. Now on to Kimberly. Now, you came in, what, about 3 years ago?
I've been here for about 3.5 years.
Yeah, and how'd they get you? You've had quite a marvelous, busy career helping many museums in different places get there.
Well, actually, it's a very unromantic story. I got a call from a search firm, and telling me about a position that was available at a wonderful museum that was about to go into an expansion, and they talked very generically about this organization. And I, of course, opened my address book and said, sure, I have friends looking for positions. Let me see here who I can give you. They said, well, we sort of thought you might be interested. I said, not at all. I'm fine here. I'm not looking for a job. And they said, well, let's have lunch anyway, and let's, talk about who you might recommend. And that's how they hooked me. I think that I talked to them over a series of several months, but the first time I came to Detroit, which was only my second time ever in the city, was the day of the groundbreaking for the new building. And I remember seeing, they literally picked me up from the airport and took me to the site. And I remember looking at the schematic saying, this is going to be really big, and wondering if people were realizing how very big this building was going to be. And so it shifted then my interest to really think about what could be done here. We had such a fine foundation that was built with Dr. Wright. I think one of the things that a lot of people in Detroit don't realize, that people who are outside of the city, this man has changed the lives of many people. I had to remind him when I first saw him in Detroit. I think I'd been here a few weeks. He came by to say hello, and I said, Dr. Wright, we met a long time ago at a museum training session that was done at the Afro-American Museum in Philadelphia in 1980. That I met him, and of course I was a young artist in the community. We were excited about this notion of what an African-American museum could be, and we went through an exhibition practicum and all of that, and that's the kind of work that changes people's lives. And he's actually done these things all around the nation. A lot of people here don't realize what a significant factor that is in building a base for this nation's cultural history.
True, and I'm sure he's like very modest about everything.
I would like to also add that people like you have a role to play, and we're happy to be here to help you play that role.
Well, thank you.
Because the public has to know what's out there, and that's to have your approval that they should see it. That is added to our saying it. They expect us to tell people to go, but when you think well enough of it to schedule events like this and talk about tours, they said, well, let's take a look at this thing too, you see. So we all have a role to play.
Yeah, we do. And we're going to go in a moment into, because I certainly don't want to run out of time, we did a wonderful little time with Carla from your publicity department of a video. But I want to say that, I have to say that the other day when I drove past the museum, I was not even supposed to be in that area, I just have to say, and then when I walked on it yesterday, I get such a sense, just even from the looking at the outside, of a celebration and ritual, and like the universe bringing in all the energy and all of it going out to call people to come to see, what our heritage is, what our past is, what the contributions of Africa and African Americans are to the world, and what each of our contributions is. And I just think it really, I don't know who you got to design it or whatever, but they really got it where it needs to be, because it's really, you walk inside, and I heard I said, are those oral histories? And then I went, wait a minute, there are voices, but it's our oral history experiencing
That's
the
right,
history
right.
of what went in the past, because what went in the past only can make us proceed to the future.
That's right.
I think it's amazing. So I'm going to shut up, and we're going to roll the tape, and if you all could, you'll see it on the monitor, kind of give us a quick walk through the museum, because it's lovely, and maybe we could speak about, I want to make sure we mention some of the contributing local artists that did the masks and the floor, and there's a technical genealogy, and then also the young people that have been involved in this. So here we go.
This is actually a shot of the building, and there's a mask over the door done by artist Richard Bennett. These masks were actually danced from the old building to the new building with 60 volunteers from our community and brought to the new facility. This piece won by another local artist, Hubert Massey, a piece called Genealogy. And around that particular piece, the names of 99 great African Americans that will be filled in over the next several years. You can see a young girl here looking at all of those names. They reflect African American scientists, scholars, historians. And then the Rotunda space, which is really a beautiful celebration space. I'm here hosting a part of a temporary exhibition called Africa, One Continent, Many Worlds. And as we go through that space, then going into now our core exhibition called Of the People, the African American Experience. This show is the largest exhibition ever created in the history of this nation on African American people. Wonderful artifacts. This a model of a slave ship built by Dr. Robert Bland, one of our local scholars. The names of over 2,500 slave ships in their native language are on panels that stretch across what is our second theater, which is a commemoration to those that died in Middle Passage. We see here Detroit teenagers who posed for tight pack installation into this particular exhibition, not meant to be a recreation of a slave ship, but really to commemorate those that died and to allow our visitors to internalize an experience that, something I didn't realize when we were working on the exhibit, the average age of enslaved African was 14. And some of our visitors coming into the exhibition, we have museum teachers that take our tours through and give them a tour.
Bag,
and this is the Dr. Wright medical bag.
And that was given to you by a doctor, right?
Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Wright is. One thing that Kimberly is pointing out, too, I think that is so important is that what has happened in our exhibit is it covers the whole spectrum of the African and African American experience, but then there's a focal point that focuses in on the Detroit experience so that it brings it right down to the site where we are and the Detroit community that has made this possible.
And this show has over 600 images, several hours of audio and video. It literally spans a 600-year history. There's only about 150 artifacts in the exhibition, 11 maps. The artifacts are used as evidence of a story, as punctuation, if you will, for a part of the American story that is little told and little understood. And we also include information about our African memory as well.
You might say that Detroit was unnatural for having this museum here, because this was one of the main gateways into Canada, Detroit. And many of the people who were enslaved here escaped to Canada from Detroit. So it's, this is why the emphasis was placed on making this the primary exhibit, even in the second museum.
And then there's the first, one of the first ballot boxes.
Yeah, this is one of my particularly favorite components because we tend to forget that many people lost their lives to the right to vote, and
Here's the old
this,
site.
of course, is our last building, yes, which was about 10 years old. And when it was built, I remember seeing Dr. Wright at a conference, God, 10 years ago, and he had brochures of this museum, and I can remember saying to him, you know, where is this? And then going away, you know, you whisper to colleagues, how do they get the money? This is in Detroit. We need to go see this, see what's going on.
You never knew you'd be part of it at that point. That's amazing. You have tremendous, there's so many people involved in creating a museum like this. I mean, it must be amazing to see all the people who have taken your dream and run with it and helped you expand it. How does one, or how do all of you work collectively, you know, with all these people and coordinate everything and make it stay, you know, when you work with many people, people can faction off. How do you keep the unity and move forward?
Well, we formed the African American Museums Association, and that was formed in Detroit about 1956 or 7, and it grew from that. And now we have an organization that has how many members? Do you know how many members there are now?
I think it's up to over 600.
Museums that have grown from this original meeting in Detroit, and it has prospered because of that.
We're going to run out of time, but I do want to talk to you all again, but I want to show a contribution. You have a woman from Ghana working with you, and that's Nana Okran, and she's a historian, and we have a little clip from her. I hope we can get that in and come back again too. So, and her contribution. I just wanted to ask you what it's like to come from Africa and be able to share the in-depth knowledge that you have with all of us in the States to clarify our understanding and history of the struggle and the contributions of African Americans.
Okay, actually it's very interesting for me as a museum educator, because to work in a museum, in order to be a successful museum professional, you need to work in other cultures and learn about other cultures. Now here I am in Detroit, far away from Africa, working in a culture very different from my culture. I'm learning about different cultures, and I'm learning, it tickles me sometimes when I talk to people and I learn about what people know about Africa. You know, it's mostly negative. Like people ask me all kinds of questions, whether I live on trees and whether I live with animals and whether I wear shoes. That's very interesting. Sometimes I like to work in another culture because I help people to understand the culture of Africa, because it's nearly always is not portrayed the way we want it to be portrayed. It's kind of myopic sometimes. And with me in the gallery sometimes I talk to children, I talk to adults, and I educate them on the African culture, and then I leave back certain aspects of the culture with the museum. I was here last year and I did a few slide presentations, slide lectures on Africa, and I'm here this time, and I'm sure the museum has benefited very much from my stay over here.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks. So we have like about 30 seconds left, but I'd like to know from each of you or one of you, what do you want people to, when they walk out the door, what do you hope they walk away with? I know what I think they walk away with, but what do you hope?
I really hope that people walk away with more questions than they have answers, and that they're hungry for more. And they continue to challenge other museums, ours, and their community to give them more information about the rich history of African Americans.
And I would have to support Kimberly in what she's saying, and to have people know that there is so much more evidence out there that needs to be discovered, and so many more books to be written that we have written for our own audience and about ourselves.
Anything
and I agree with both of those ladies who have expressed my opinion about where we go from here. Thank you.
Great. And I want to thank you all so much. I think I'm out of time, I'm not sure, but I want to thank you all for your contributions, and for you especially, because if it wasn't for your dream and then getting all these wonderful people to carry it forward, we wouldn't have this, and now we can give it on to the future.
And I have had their help and other people's help all along.
Right.
Didn't do it by myself.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and I'll be treasuring that museum always and sending everybody from New York to Detroit. Okay. Well, thank you for being with us. Till next time, be well. And go after your dream, because you may be able to create a museum yourself.
Something to offer, something that's new. Something to offer, that something is you. Something to offer, something that's new. Something to offer, that something is you. 'Cause you got something to offer, something that's new. Something to offer, and that something is you. You've got a vision, you persevere. You keep on trying, you're a pioneer. 'Cause you got something
MAAH located in Soho for Miss Offers Wardrobe, and Echo Videotape on 9th Avenue for helping to make this show possible. But we would especially like to thank you for watching. I'm Jeannie Devlin. We look forward to having you with us next week, and in the meantime, remember, the world needs what you have to offer. To all you Internet users, please visit us on www.freeinfo.com.